Hello, everyone. We will get started in just a minute. Welcome, welcome. Happy Friday afternoon, everyone.
Mhm.
Hello, hello from across the country. We are thrilled that you are here. We're letting everyone populate in, and then we will get going. Hello. Oh, I would love to see where everyone is joining us from. Please feel free to drop that in the chat. That's great. Hello, hello. All right. We still have a few folks pouring in, but we are going to go ahead and get started because we want to use every moment of this time that we have together. Hi there, friends and colleagues. My name is Emma Jones. I'm the Executive Vice President at Credo, powered by Carnegie. We are thrilled to have you with us today. Thank you for taking the time this afternoon, and we are going to get started. Before we begin, I want to do a quick audio check to make sure that you can hear us and that the closed captioning is functioning properly. If a few people would use your raise your hand feature and let us know that the audio is coming through loud and clear, would appreciate it. You get a few hands. All right, awesome. Thank you. Got some applause. I like that even more. Fabulous. Thank you. All right, today's discussion is going to last about 45 minutes. We'll have some dedicated time for questions at the end. If you'd like to submit a question, please use the Zoom's Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can. We know we probably will not be able to get to all of them. There's a lot to talk about. The Zoom chat room is open, so feel free to share your ideas and interact with each other during the conversation. Just make sure that you have your share settings marked to all attendees and presenters. The webinar is being recorded. We will share it via email next week, so keep an eye on your inbox and we'll send you a note when the recording is available. And finally, please do help us out by filling out the post-webinar survey. Your comments are really appreciated, and they'll help us select topics of the greatest interest and impact for future webinars. You'll see a message asking you to submit the survey shortly after we conclude the webinar today. All right, that's all the housekeeping. Now let's get into the good stuff. Let's go ahead and dive in. I am so pleased to be joined here by my colleague, Dr. Shankar Prasad, Chief Strategy Officer at Carnegie. Hi, Shankar. Great to see you here on a Friday. And we are really honored to be joined for this conversation by leaders of three national higher education associations. Dr. Marjorie Haas is the president of the Council of Independent Colleges. Prior to her CIC presidency, Marjorie served as the president at Austin College and then as president at Rhodes College. Dr. Charles Chuck Welch is the president of the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. Prior to his time at ASCU, Chuck served as the president of Henderson State University and then as the president of the Arkansas State University System. And Dr. Barbara Snyder is the president of the Association of American Universities, following her presidency at Case Western Reserve University. Marjorie, Chuck, Barbara, in our work and in our partnerships, we see all the time the really incredible capacity building and convening power that associations like yours bring to the sector and to your member institutions. Your organizations have always been really valuable in their advocacy for institutions and for the students that they serve, and are critically important during times of disruption and change. We saw this during the pandemic, for sure, and we're certainly seeing that again right now. So we want to thank you, first and foremost, for your steadfast leadership in the field of higher education, and of course, for your willingness to join us today on a Friday afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to hand it over to Shankar.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I just want to start by acknowledging that this week has been a busy week. A lot has happened, frankly, keeping in pace with a year of dizzying turbulence. Most recently, we've seen the government revoke Harvard University's ability to enroll international students. Following that, the State Department issued guidance announcing its move to potentially revoke the visas for students from China. And finally, the House Reconciliation Bill, which is part of President Trump's sweeping tax and immigration package with far-reaching impacts on higher education, passed the House and now has moved to the Senate. All have far-ranging implications for the sector, and we're going to invite you all to share your perspectives on these and other topics as we go through today's conversations. But let's jump in. While many of us anticipated certain higher education priorities based on President Trump's campaign rhetoric, such as the administration's actions on the Department of Education, on the proposed increases in the endowment tax. I'm curious about whether anything that has happened in the last couple months, certainly about the political climate or the policy direction, has surprised you in terms of how it's actually unfolded. And maybe, Barbara, I'll ask you to kick us off.
Okay, well, I think we certainly expected some of what's been coming, but the intensity with which it's come, and particularly the focus on a very small number of institutions, that's been surprising. And I think the amount of I'll just say the amount of really concerning issues for higher education has been pretty staggering right now. I've never seen so many things coming at us in such a short period of time. So that intensity and the speed would, I guess, be the most shocking things for me.
Thanks, Barbara. Chuck?
Well, Barbara, when Shocker asked that question, I wrote down speed because I think that is one of the things all of us are really surprised by. It's just the volume of activities and actions and executive orders in such a short period of time. And just the scale of some of these. I mean, the executive order that just said grants and loans are going to be suspended, or just 15% across the board change in indirect cost, or we're going to revoke all Chinese visas. I mean, these are things that there doesn't seem to be a strategy other than just really chaos, to be quite frank. And I mean, it's just I still can't wrap my head around the question of whether a college degree is a good thing or not. I mean, that to me, it just goes beyond anything that we could expect. We can question whether it costs too much. We can question whether certain things are properly aligned, but there's no question that it's a good thing. And so it's not only surprising, it's troubling, I think, in what some of these actions could do. And I think the other thing that we have to keep in mind is that some of these actions aren't just going to go away in 2 or 4 years. They're going to have repercussions for a long time, regardless of who is in the administration.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, one of the things as a follow-up that I'm struck by when we look at this moment is that we're represented by a tremendous amount of diversity in higher education. If we look at you three, or both of you right now, Barbara, AAU serves 71 of the leading research universities, public and private, around the country. Chuck, your organization represents 350 public institutions across the country. The Council of Independent Colleges represents another 700 independent colleges around the country. As you look across this landscape, and you think about the conversations that you're having with college presidents, university presidents right now, are there common themes or strategies that are emerging that are helping them and helping the advice that you're providing them to navigate this landscape at this period of time? And conversely, are there things that are different as you look at the different types of institutions that you're serving, public, private, research, teaching focused, small, big, that you're seeing are differentiated?
I'll go first on that one, Barbara. I mean, I think that, yeah, there are definitely some things. We're all concerned about changes to the Pell Grant. We're all concerned about the deficit that we're going to have in the Pell Fund at the end of this federal fiscal year if something's not done about that. We're all concerned about changes to subsidized loans and changes to Grant Plus loans. We're all concerned about, although this isn't a higher education issue, we're all concerned about Medicaid and changes that could be made there from two fronts. One, obviously, what that would do to state budgets and what that would mean to our higher education budgets in those states, but also the fact that there are 3.4 million students in this country who rely on Medicaid. And so there's obviously enormous impact. And so we're all concerned about the research cuts. Now, that's where you see some differences. Obviously, Barbara's institutions, it's much larger dollars and more grants, but it definitely impacts ours. We have a large number of institutions who are R1s, R2s, or research colleges and universities under the new Carnegie classification. And although the dollars aren't as large because our institutions tend to be lower resource to begin with, the impact is very great and significant. And because many of our institutions do applied research, it's going to have a direct impact on the regional economies. So I think that really, I mean, some of it has to do with sort of, there are some variances and differences maybe in the number of institutions impacted, possibly the total dollar amounts. But all of these things are hurting our institutions. And if we want to get into international enrollment, that opens up a whole different conversation that I'll let my colleagues speak to.
So Marjorie, maybe I'll ask you to jump in and say, one of the things that CIC, what's extraordinary is that you represent 700 institutions around the country. And so I'm curious, are there themes that are emerging that are similar, themes that are emerging that are different as you manage across a very, diverse landscape of higher ed institutions?
Sure. First of all, I'm really delighted to be here and pleased to be with Barbara and Chuck, who are such strong leaders on behalf of higher education. Yes, these things affect CIC's institutions, which are mostly small to medium-sized private institutions, everything from elite liberal arts colleges to religious institutions to comprehensive universities. They affect us differently and the same, as Chuck said. So for the science research grants, a lot of the funding that our institutions get is not so much directed at specific faculty research projects, although there is certainly some of that. More than half of the research intensive undergraduate institutions are CIC members. But these are grants to help create the pipeline into STEM. So many of our institutions have undergraduate research grants from either NSF or NIH. These fund efforts to engage students in STEM, to give them the kinds of experiences that may encourage them to want to go on to be in science. And so, I feel as though cutting those dollars to our institution is eating our seed corn. We're not just losing the generation of current scholars and researchers, losing the future generation. We are cutting ourselves off at the knees. We are eating our young. It's very, very upsetting. I've just heard story after story of students who had done all the work, majored in STEM fields, which is exactly what the government has been telling them to do. Go for those places where we need workers. And what do they find? They find that their graduate stipends have been cut off, as Barbara can say, as the research ones scramble to try to fix that. So that's true. And then as Chuck said, I would triple it down on the international students. Again, maybe we don't have the same percentage as some of the institutions currently being explicitly targeted, but the dollars those students bring are existential for our institutions. I just have an op-ed coming out in the Hill next week talking about this and saying that when we surveyed our presidents 2 years ago and asked them, what's on your mind? They were all focused on improving education for students. Everybody had that focused on their mind. We asked them this year, what's on your mind? Responding to this chaotic environment and paying what I'm calling the chaos tax.
And I'll just note, Shankar, that I agree with everything that Marjorie and Chuck have mentioned already. And in addition, in research, we are not just making it so that the next generation will be far smaller of people in the science and technology pipeline for employment. So employers who are looking at that, our own institutions who are looking at potential new faculty will find that there are many fewer trained people because right now our institutions are accepting fewer graduate students. And because they have fewer research grants to help support those students and therefore fewer opportunities. So those students, the smaller number of them, that will ripple through the system for years and years. I mean, as Chuck said, this isn't a short-term thing, and Marjorie too. This is a very long-term thing, and it cannot be turned back on in 5 minutes. I know some people think, well, if we just survive this, it'll all be better at some point in the future. These actions that are being taken right now have a very long tail, and it won't be as simple as turning it back on.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary long view ahead of the impacts of this moment. One of the things that we always think about, Barbara and Chuck and Marjorie, is that behind all of these really complex issues, there are leaders like you and leaders on campuses everywhere who are navigating all of these complexities every day. Marjorie, you just talked about the chaos tax, which we know is really high. We've been thinking about how during the global pandemic 5 years ago, we all really dramatically expanded our emotional and our professional skill sets to meet the needs of that extraordinary period of time. So I wonder if you could speak to what muscles do you think we developed as leaders that can serve us well now as we enter into this different phase? And Barbara, I wonder if we could start with you.
Yeah, well, at AAU, we've developed a muscle that we never had before. So I'll mention that we just earlier this year celebrated our 125th anniversary. And in 125 years, we've never sued anybody, but now we have 3 times, in fact. So that is a muscle we had never used before, but now we've brought an action to challenge the 15% cap on F&A for the NIH, the Department of Energy, and then the National Science Foundation. So far, those cases are proceeding, but it is something that I never expected that we would do. If you would ask me when I joined 5 years ago, would we be suing anybody? I would have said no. So we've had to respond quickly. And on our campuses, our presidents and chancellors, they've had to respond quickly. And not just our presidents and chancellors, our provosts have had to respond quickly. Our directors of enrollment management or VPs for enrollment management, whatever they're called, they've had to respond quickly. The VPs for student affairs have had to respond incredibly quickly. Our international student offices have had to respond incredibly quickly. All these populations on our campuses have extraordinary needs right now. And everybody is saying, do something. That's what we hear, and that's what our leaders hear. And so they're asking for a speedy, but also thoughtful and measured response. And trying to be thoughtful and measured and also respond rapidly is one of the things that we all have been called on to do.
Thank you, Barbara. Marjorie, what do you think?
I think, in COVID, we were doing that in partnership with the federal government. And there was a sense of there's a crisis, we're all in it together. We were applauded for doing our part. I was president of Rhodes College at that time. We kept our campus open and we managed to get through that without firing a single employee. Everybody made sacrifices to make sure that we were not laying off housekeepers or food service workers. We felt a sense of the community is in this together. Obviously, this is absolutely different. I mean, we're being vilified and punished for doing the work that makes America truly great, and for doing the work that builds America. So it's heartbreaking. I think there's a sense of grief that I didn't feel during COVID when people were rolling up their sleeves and coming together as a nation. The other muscle, though, that I think we are developing, which is also very important, is we are developing a more collaborative model. I mean, the fact that you have the three of us on here and that we are singing from the same songbook is a sign that the entire higher ed ecosystem is coming together in ways that I have not seen before, across sectors, across other divides, across public and private. So that I think will serve us well in the future. We also, in addition to learning, about how to file lawsuits, as Barbara said, I hope we learn to use the muscle for a more radical form of creative thinking. I don't want to see us just in a defensive posture, huddled down, fending off attacks, although we have to fend off attacks. I want to see us envisioning what are the universities and the colleges that we want to build for the next generation. We know there are problems. All of us have been involved in working to make our sector and working to make individual institutions more successful. We know there are changes that have to happen. Let's use this time to think about a better form, a ways we can meet our mission and the mission and promise of American higher education even better in the future.
Thank you, Marjorie. Chuck, what do you think?
Well, I mean, the only thing I would add to what my colleague said, the similarity between COVID is really that we're A, dealing with something we've never seen before, and B, with very limited information. I'm constantly apologizing to our presidents for not being able to provide more clarity on the why or what the details are. It's simply not there. And we found that people in the administration and certainly on Capitol Hill can't even answer the questions at times. And so, it kind of feels like COVID a little bit when we don't know what comes next or what this looks like or what the solutions are. Totally agree that we've got to be more collaborative. And then the other thing that I would say is that the real challenge I know all three of us are facing and that we talk about constantly is making sure that we help our campuses and don't harm them. Seeing the reactions to certain things that have happened, the vindictiveness, quite frankly, we have to be really careful because I can say something that would benefit some of my campuses in certain states and prevent campuses in other states from even being able to be a member of our association. It's real. And while we talk a lot about free speech, I'm not sure how free it is in certain parts, and it's really challenging for some of our campuses, and it's challenging for us to make sure they understand why we're doing certain things, that we're being very strategic in our communications, that we're being selective about our communications, and that we're making sure that our voice isn't just drowned out by commenting on everything, that we really have to be more direct and strategic.
Thank you, all three of you. It's amazing to think that we are building muscles upon muscles that we didn't know we would need to build, right, 5 years ago, just even a very different moment. Thanks to all three.
Thanks, Emma, and thank you all. I'm going to pick up on a similar thread. A recent study by Carnegie found that 2/3 of students and parents believe that colleges should be supporting students in navigating and understanding complex political issues. Chuck, you sort of talked about this, Marjorie, Barbara as well. I'm curious, what do you all think is higher education's role as we think about addressing a complex partisan divide that exists in our country today?
Mm.
And maybe we'll start with Marjorie on this one.
Well, I think all of us are searching our souls, right? All of us as Americans are searching our souls to ask how could we have let it come to this? What and where did we fail to create such a divided country? On the other hand, I think we often paint higher ed with too broad a brush. So we look at the most newsworthy stories, which particularly around issues of free expression, free speech, political partisanship, tend to be the places where something has gone very wrong. And we imagine that that is what's happening on college campuses. It couldn't be further from the truth. Every day on thousands of campuses, in thousands of classrooms, faculty and students are having deep, hard conversations about really difficult, challenging issues of world politics, issues of American politics, issues of ethics and moral import. That's the place in our society where those conversations are happening. I don't know where else they are. I can't imagine that most people are in their workplaces having these kinds of hard and challenging conversations across real divides. They're not happening in churches, synagogues, or mosques for the most part. We know those are in many ways the most segregated by race and by politics spaces in our country. They're not happening in many places in the coffee shop or the bus stop. So colleges are already playing a leading role, I think, in looking to this. I thought it was really marvelous that Harvard, for example, is offering free courses in just basic civics, and saying, "Ooh, here's something we could do." And when I talk about how do we make the world better on the other side of it, that's exactly what I'm thinking about. It's not going to be enough for us to just say, well, we're going to go back to being kind of insularly focused on just our colleges and universities, just our students. We have to provide an education for America. We have to be a place where we say we have these great blessings, these great opportunities, these great resources, And we are finding ways to make sure that every American feels the way that their life is better because our institutions are flourishing. And that has not always happened for good reason and et cetera. But we have to own some of that and imagine how we're going to do that better.
Thank you, Marjorie. That's really well said. Barbara, what do you think?
Yeah, so our campuses, I think, have really worked hard to try to address this, to meet this moment by making sure that they're showing students, teaching students how to have these difficult conversations. Because it's one thing to say in theory you need to have them, and we do across these divisions that are so deeply embedded in our society in this country right now. But we need to teach people the skills to be able to have those conversations respectfully and productively so that people really listen to a different viewpoint and take some of that in. What happens so much with the media is that people are talking and listening in echo chambers. They, are hearing what they want to hear. And what our campuses have the opportunity to do is bringing students and faculty together across many of these divides and trying to give students the tools to be able to have these conversations again respectfully with the right amount of listening and talking. So you get a chance to express your views, but you also get a chance to hear other people's views. And I think it's so important for us to be modeling that kind of behavior. And our faculty and our staff and our leaders, I think, have really taken that seriously. I wrote a blog post not too long ago about this very issue, gave some specific examples, which I won't go into, but I will say that I'm proud of the campuses that have taken that on. And I think ours have, and I think Chuck's have, and I think Marjorie's have. I think our campuses have really seen the need and stepped up to try to meet that need right now.
Thank you, Barbara. Chuck?
Well, ASCU over 20 years ago started a project called the American Democracy Project in collaboration with the New York Times. And the purpose of that program that served over 300 campuses is to do exactly the question you just asked, help students to understand their role in a thriving democracy. Certainly not to teach them or tell them what to think, but to talk about how to think about it, how to get the right information, how to analyze that information, encourage civic participation and engagement. Students or campuses that have participated in our project have had far higher numbers of students who vote than not. And it's always been nonpartisan. It's always been very popular. It's always been well understood. We recently got a subpoena on that program with the underlying accusation that we're trying to encourage certain students who will vote a certain way to register to vote. That's not what it's about. And, questioning something about with the word democracy in it is really concerning. But I'm proud to say that we've not backed down from it, nor have our campuses. And we'll have a summit later this summer that the participation numbers have been great. And what we continually hear from our campuses are, it's more important now than ever that we have these conversations. Obviously, the irony that's lost in all of this is the individuals who scream the loudest that we indoctrinate students in a certain way all attended and graduated from our institutions. So clearly, we are educating students from all backgrounds, students from all political philosophies and ideologies, and that's what we're supposed to do. So I think, we have to continue to double down. We simply cannot step back and say, well, democracy, that's a dirty word or something we can't do. I mean, now more than ever, we've got to double down. And like Barbara said, I think, our campuses are definitely doing that.
Yeah, thank you, all three of you.
Can I just add one quick thing too, though, about this is, we can talk about colleges needing to present both sides or multiple sides or et cetera, but there's a big difference if we say, well, the difference in the sides is how they believe, whether they believe in supply side economics. You don't have to believe, you don't have to have you don't only teach your view on that if you're an economics professor. You teach the whole range of views. Students are encouraged to make up their own minds and think about things and look at evidence, et cetera. But If we're talking about the difference between the sides is those who believe in the rule of law and those who think that the government should somehow be above the rule of law. No, our institutions are not going to be fair and balanced on that. I don't, you can't keep moving the goalpost and saying, well, college professors are getting more and more liberal. They may not have changed that much. What's moved is the line between conservative, what counts as a conservative or a liberal view. And I think we often fail to take that into account.
But that's where I think sticking with our values is really, really important, Marjorie, because I think our members are institutions that have been around in some cases longer than the country has, but in any case for a very long time. And the values that I think we share are enduring values.
Yes.
And they've been around, and we need to, I think, figure out how we stay true to those, even in this time of tumultuous change and even with the chaos tax, as you said, Marjorie, going on.
To this discussion, there was a follow-up from one of the attendees today. The question from Anthony Bita is, how do universities and colleges provide a balanced approach to these dialogues when statistically the faculty, particularly in social sciences, are significantly leaning towards the left?
Mm.
Archer, you sort of touched on this, but I wonder if all three of you could comment on that.
There are a variety of ways to tackle that issue. For one thing, I don't count faculty out in terms of whatever their own personal perspective, being able to have these conversations across a wide range of issues. That's part of what they, I think, feel that they should be doing and do in the classroom every day. And I also think that there are a wide range of opportunities for campuses to invite speakers with very diverse opinions to come to campus. Student groups do that, faculty invite speakers and so forth. So campuses, one of the beauties of being a part of a campus community is the opportunity to hear from many different kinds of speakers over the course of an academic year or over the course of a 4-year undergraduate degree, if you choose to take advantage of that.
And I'm a philosopher, so from the beginning, much of my beginning career was teaching philosophy and to undergraduates, and that means inevitably that you're going to be dealing with controversial issues. I had one ground rule in my classroom, and that was this: we have to begin with the assumption that everyone in this classroom is equally human, equally valuable as a human being, because that's the ground rule for us to have a conversation. Now you can say whatever you want, and we will deal with it and we will address it. But be aware, you're going to have to back up your view with argument. You will be challenged. You cannot assume that you get a pass on that. And you don't get to just take your marbles and go home. You got to stay in the debate and the dialogue and the conversation. I know that is, again, happening thousands of classrooms right as we speak. That's going on across the country. It doesn't make the news.
And I'm just going to double down on what Barbara said. I mean, when I think back to my own collegiate experience, I got as much from outside of the classroom as I did inside in terms of socially and from a leadership perspective and experiencing different, ideologies and understandings of the world. And so, I mean, and I think our campuses are doing that. That's not what you hear. We've become far too anecdotal. We pick out one thing that happens on one campus and everyone's guilty of it. Or we pick out that one thing without balancing it with the 50 things that have been done right, or said that, maybe is in agreement with what a certain person says. So, I mean, I think we have to continue to seek multiple different ways of that opportunity, but also keep in mind, we've got to give our students credit too.
Mhm.
I had professors in college who said things that I did not agree with. I didn't just immediately start agreeing with them because they said it, but it caused me to begin to think about, am I looking at this correctly? And maybe having me internally do it. So we've got to give our students some credit too, as well, that they're just not coming in and being spoon fed everything that's given to them and running out and believing that for the rest of their lives. That's not the students I've encountered. I can tell you that
No.
for certain.
Yes, if we could, as we often say, if we could indoctrinate them, they would all be doing the reading. They don't have been philosophy majors if I could have indoctrinated them. The other thing to remember is you know, the average age of a college freshman is no longer 18, right? Many of the people in undergraduate having undergraduate experiences are adults, working adults, parents. And this is not as though these are wilting flowers or young children who are afraid to talk back to the grown-ups. That's not how the classroom works.
Yeah, really great point. Thank you, Marjorie. Thank you for this discussion. It's terrific so far. And thank you, Anthony, for the question from the audience. Emma, to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This is such a great conversation. We've asked you a lot of questions, and I imagine that in your roles, you get lots and lots of questions from lots of people. So we would love to know, what's one question you wish people were asking about the current state of higher education, and how would you answer it? Marjorie, dive in.
One question I think is what are the good jobs of the future? Everything we hear from this administration is that we need to be focused on preparing students to have meaningful careers, good jobs, meet the needs. What are those? I mean, we thought we were doing that. We thought STEM, but apparently not. That's not apparently where the needs are. We thought public service, but there's no jobs there. People are being fired in droves. What are the jobs that AI is not going to cannibalize and that this government still believes we need to train Americans and educate Americans to be ready to do? I don't think we have an answer for that. And until we have an answer for that, it's going to be very difficult for colleges to ensure that they are putting resources in places that truly will make this country better. College is not just about getting a good job, but I think all of us would agree it is also about getting a good job. And it feels to me like we're just in this death spiral, uh, uh, destroying the very things that make us more secure, make us more prosperous.
Marjorie, Chuck, what do you think?
I wish I wish somebody would say, how is higher ed helping this country? They want to talk about how we're hurting it or changing it. But, when you hear policymakers talk about what the biggest challenges they face, it's tax revenue. It is unemployment. It is incarceration rates and related costs. It's healthcare and related costs. It's public support programs like Medicaid and SNAP and things. Every single one of those improve when an individual has a college degree. Their unemployment rate is less, they make more money, they live longer, they use healthcare earlier so they don't spend as much on it. Ultimately, a very small percentage have to rely on public support programs. Obviously, the tax base rises. So, look, think about it for a second. What happens if that goes away? I think about my own family, my grandparents who didn't get past the eighth grade, my paternal grandfather who was couldn't read or write. I think about they had to rely on public support programs. They had unemployment. They had all these things. It stopped with me because of higher education. We stopped that cycle. So why aren't we talking about that and talking about the direct impact that we have on this country? We've got to quit talking about higher education as an expense and talk about it as an investment. It's an investment in the individual. It's an investment in the family. It's an investment in the community, and it's an investment in this entire country. And we've got to reframe that conversation.
Thank you, Chuck. Barbara, what do you think?
Yeah, I think those are both Marjorie's and Chuck's questions are great, and I agree with both of them. I would like to talk about how we in higher education need to continue to ask how we can serve the country. Because I do think that there's a perception that we're not asking that question. I think we have been in some ways, but I think we need to more overtly ask, how can we serve the country? And then listen to answers and see how we can do that. Higher ed has had so many important roles in serving this nation in a variety of ways, economically and national security and public health. And I think there are, and citizenship, democracy, I mean, so many ways. And I think we need to keep asking ourselves and asking the public, what can we do? What can we do better? What can we do more or less that would help advance our national interests?
Yeah, Emma, can I add one thing to
Please,
that?
of
I
course.
think Barbara is absolutely right. I mean, and we've leveled a lot of criticisms or concerns at others, but we've got to look at ourselves too. Some of this we have created. by our unwillingness to change, by our unwillingness to adapt, by creating this perception, whether it's right or wrong, that we know better than everyone else that's created this. So I think Barbara's right. We've got to take a look in the mirror as well and say, what can we do? How can we do it? Listen, hear that, and make those changes. I mean, times have changed. I mean, when you look at retail, when you look at banking, when you look at really the media, communications, really any aspect of society, they've had to change radically. We haven't been as willing to do so, and I think we have to do that as well. And so I 100% agree.
Thank you, Chuck. We actually have a question from the audience that really, I think, ties into that notion. So I will ask this from Allison Morrison Shetler. Hi, Allison. Great to have you here. We talk about the headwinds. And as someone who sails, Allison says, headwinds stop you and result in the ship going backward. How do we strategically navigate and trim our sails to use these headwinds to move us forward? Collaboration is essential. Being nimble is essential to make sure our students, who deserve the best education in publics and privates, are being served well and understand the negative politics of today. So I love that question. How do we strategically navigate and trim our sails to help all of this move us forward? I think all three of you have spoken to this, to a certain degree as we go through the conversation, but I'd welcome any additional thoughts from you about that. Anyone who wants to dive in.
Marjorie actually said it earlier when she talked about not letting this, letting this crisis go to waste. She said it would be a shame if we had all this and yet we kept doing exactly what we've been doing, even, as all of this goes on. So I think that continuous questioning of how we can better serve the needs of the people that we're serving and the American people broadly is a really important question. And of course, I think we also serve people globally. And I think that's an important question to ask as well, because I think we have those responsibilities beyond just our own borders.
Thank you, Barbara. We're going to do a bit of a rapid fire here and get through some of the questions in the chat. So maybe we'll go with the first person who feels compelled to respond here. We have a great question about President Trump recently signed an executive order concerning accreditation, but I'm still unclear on its implications. How might this affect schools and higher education institutions? Who wants to offer a thought on that?
I'll jump in. I mean, I've had few in the academy who have argued that perhaps we do need some reform and change in accreditation. And so I think the concern, at least that I have and that our institutions have expressed, is not so much that we're going to change the system or look for different ways of doing things or allow greater flexibility. It's obviously the devil in the details. We can't have 50 different accreditation systems based in each state where the political winds of the day can determine exactly everything that's going to be determined. We have to make sure that accreditation remains focused on financial sustainability and institutional sustainability and student success and getting to that end result. So I would just say that, I don't think the concern is so much about should we have some change. It's obviously about what does that look like and how do we protect the the independence and the true nature of what accreditation is supposed to be.
Thank you, Chuck. I wonder, Marjorie, since we've gotten an answer from Barbara and from Chuck here, here's one more question. Do you have any recommendations for how to effectively address or buffer misinformation that students are encountering about higher education, especially around cost, value, or outcomes?
Well, we have not made it easy for people to get clear answers. I mean, we do have a very complicated pricing structure. I think in many ways it's a good pricing structure in the sense that it does it does redistribute wealth. There is a sense in higher ed for the most part that the people who pay more it's because they can afford it, and people who can't pay more are offered opportunities to go, and we do that in a variety of ways. We have, though, I think, I may be the only person who still believes in this, but I do have concerns about merit aid. I think merit aid has gotten out of control, and it has muddied the waters. When aid is need-based, people understand it. When aid is merit-based, there's a lot of smushing and fudging around the edges, and that's not something any one institution can solve on its own. That has to be a sector-wide decision and some perhaps different kinds of policies put in place. It's hard because the policymakers are exactly the class of people whose benefit from those merit aid awards and who like them as markers of success for themselves and their children. But I think it has muddied the water. So I do think more transparency about pricing. It's hard to find, a better explanation of what it is that a student is paying for when they pay tuition. I think would also, and room and board would also be helpful. It's not always clear to people what the real expenses are of running an institution, et cetera. So I think there are some ways to that. We also need more public support. The public support is not kept up with real rising costs. When I was a college president, people used to say to me, "What's the one policy change we could make that would reduce the cost of a college education?" And I used to say single payer healthcare, since as a service industry, my biggest expense is salaries and benefits, and medical benefits for my employees were the fastest rising cost. So, we put all of this burden on individual employers, and then we wonder why the product is so expensive.
Thanks for that, Marjorie. I'm going to ask our final question here. I want to acknowledge that we have several hundred individuals joining today's call. Many are college presidents or other higher education leaders. I hope maybe each of you could comment quickly on what you think the opportunities are for higher ed institutions and associations like yours to work collaboratively to navigate this turbulence today and in the future. And maybe I'll start with Chuck, and then we can go Barbara and Marjorie.
Well, I mean, it's happening, and one of the things Marjorie sort of mentioned earlier, being more proactive. And I know that in our sixth group, our governmental relations officials are working with us on developing proactive strategies or responses, not just saying, "Hey, we're against that proposal," but would you consider this? We're doing it in the F&A space. We're talking about it in the risk sharing space. We're talking about it on a whole host of fronts. And I think that's critically important. We have to try to find a way to align our messaging to come up with programs. Now that comes with change, and obviously that's hard. We're all for change as long as we do it our way. But I think that now more than ever, we've got to coalesce, and I'm pleased to say that's happening. But that kind of goes back to the opening question. The complexities and variations that impact may differ, but every one of these issues is impacting every one of our institutions in some way. And so it's so important that we find the solutions and try to propose those and work directly with policymakers. Yeah. We're spending a lot of time on the Hill having direct conversations and really making it local, talking about what it does to their district, because we know for a fact it's not been public. But behind the scenes, the only thing that's moving the needle in the conversations is when members of Congress see what it does to their local institution or to their local economy.
Yeah, great point. Barbara?
Chuck is 100% right. And since I work with him on a very regular basis on those issues, I can vouch for the fact that he and we are doing that all the time. And it is an opportunity in this moment to recognize all the things we have in common and the critical need to work together. And I think that if there's been any silver lining, I don't want to find a silver lining here because it's been rough, but if there's been a silver lining, it has been the way that people have really gotten together and are communicating even more frequently. It did start with COVID, and I think that's been good and it's continued. But there's an even greater intensity and a recognition of the need to stand together and to work together. But at the same time, I want to emphasize Chuck's point about everything that matters is on the local level.
Yeah.
Because even though we can talk about these broad policies nationwide and their impact, it is so true that what moves the needle is talking to members of Congress about their own state or their own district. And those are the conversations that our presidents and chancellors are having. And I give them tremendous credit. More of them are coming more frequently to Washington and meeting with their members when they're back home in their districts. And that has been essential right now and will continue to be. That communication is critical, and it shouldn't just happen in a crisis. It should be happening all the time. But it is happening right now, and I think that's been a really productive thing.
And, this is important to remember. There's only, I think, a handful of congressional districts that don't have a college or university located in them. And as both Chuck and Barbara indicated, that college and university usually plays a significant role in the local economy. Even small colleges are often among the largest employers or are the cultural centers of their communities. Rural colleges really rely on their local institutions. So that I think is important to remember. I do want to say as well, Chuck and Barbara talked about the kind of policy and working with Congress and yes, yes, yes to all of that. I also want to say I think there are other things that we can do collaboratively. I noticed someone in the chat asked about international students. CIC, for example, we're bringing some of the leadership teams from some of our international members. We have a number of international universities that are part of CIC in August to talk with some of our American presidents about ways that they may be able to provide temporary housing locations, places for students to study if they are prohibited from coming into the United States or returning to the United States. Ways to do that, sort of like we have done during certain national emergencies where campuses become uninhabitable or what have you. So we are working on those things. We are doing a lot to support our presidents, working together, a number of initiatives that we have to build stronger economic models for our institutions through collaboration. We have to come out of this stronger as a higher ed sector. Our country needs that. The world needs that.
Yeah, agreed. I love the idea of making this a local story, and I appreciate the nod to the global impact. And we have a lot of folks on this call who are calling in from other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Thank you. We got so many good questions in the chat. We are not going to be able to answer all of those today. Please know that we have captured those and we'll take those into account as we think about more conversations that we want to have in the future. Chuck and Marjorie and Barbara, thank you so much. Your voices and your passion in this work are so very needed. And we are all really grateful for the work that you are doing every day to keep higher education in the public eye, to keep us moving forward as we navigate some real complexity. Ultimately, all of us, literally everyone on this call and who signed up for this webinar is in this work because of the transformational impact on students and their learning. It is all of our whys. Because their education, their transformation will change their families, their communities, and change the world. And we are all really committed to that. So we have a lot ahead of us, a lot to navigate. We want to say thank you to everyone who is on this call and who signed up for the webinar for the work that you are doing every day. We know that you are plowing through and rededicating to a purpose that's really, really important. So thank you for your work and thank you for being here. We are grateful for your time, everyone, and we are going to call it a wrap. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Great to see you.